Mi rečemo, da katapult skupaj z Vitaskom in z vsemi startupi, ki so tukaj med nami, vse skupaj tvorijo tako mesto akrobatov. Za nas so akrobati tisti, ki spreminjajo svet seveda na bolje, taki inovatorji, ki morajo nekaj novega razvijati. In tukaj je tako okolje, ko je eno mestece, kjer lahko dobijo čim več stvari, da bodo to čim bolj razvijali, da imamo neke slovenske inovacije, ki grejo v svet. Today it's not just, many of us, you're not from Slovenia, so welcome all in Catapult. This seminar will be in English. And why is this seminar? It will be about vested model. To be honest, we didn't get the right translation yet. So today will be, someone will get the prize or something if you find great Slovenian word for vested model. So just let me know at the end, okay? Why the vested model? It's because when we started to know more about this philosophy, we said, you know what, that's our DNA. We live that by those rules, we work by those rules, and we thought that's normal and that we all live by it. But it's not so normal, so common in every company in Slovenia or every company in the whole world. That's why we say probably it's good to share that philosophy, because more of us who understand that philosophy, we believe that easier will be to cooperate, of course, and to have great results. What's in our DNA, in the seat of acrobats, we always say that we like to have open book management, so being very, having this transparency. We have rewarding system and employee ownership, Vitasek and Catapult as well, and we support that with our startups, of course. We're all in this together. We always say, okay, it's not me against you, but come on, let's work together and we'll get better results. Sharing results, shared services, and caring for our society. That's something that for us is very important, and that's something that vested philosophy has as well. So, Kate, warmly welcome here in Poglejte. Kate Vitasek, I did it right, Vitasek, Kate Vitasek. She came here because we said we want to know more about vested model for our City of Acrobats. Kate made award-winning research, and she is the founder of the vested model and author of many books. So we want to have the source to teach us about it, and Kate is the source. World Trade Magazine said that she's one of the fabulous 50+1 people influencing global commerce. So Kate, welcome here in Poglejte, and we would love to hear more and know more about the vested model. Here you are.
Good evening. Try again. Good evening. Awesome. So, as mentioned, my name is Kate Vitasek. I'm a professor at the University of Tennessee, and I study the art, science, and practice of highly collaborative win-win business relationships. So a little bit about our research. It actually started in 2003 when the dean at the University of Tennessee College of Business got a call from the Department of Defense and the Air Force. And they said, you know, we're not so good at collaborating, especially with our biggest suppliers. There's, not many suppliers who make airplanes and make all these, high-end weapon systems. And it says it just feels like it's a win-lose. We're big and they're big, and we just are always in a tug-of-war. And they wanted us to study that. And so think about supply chains. Supply chains, how you become more efficient. And so even though it's from an operations perspective, supply chains extend beyond your four walls. And so that project landed on my desk in 2003. And so between 2003 and 2009, I got to study good relationships with the Department of Defense and Air Force, bad ones, and more importantly, any organization. I wanted to see who was awesome at collaborating and creating really amazing results with their business partners. And that research led to what we had coined the vested business model. So I understand here in Slovenia that there's not a good word for vested. So I want you to just think about the concept of vested. So in English, we think about being invested. So I'm invested in you, you're invested in me, Or I might use my stock options or my retirement fund, and I am vested in my funds. So meaning that I've put in funds and over time they grow. So we think about growth. And I often think, really it's about I'm vested in your success. So a win for you is a win for me. So if those are kind of the philosophy, win-win, shared risk, shared reward, how do you actually pull it off? And that's where I had, and I still to this day have the funnest job in the world, because I get to study not only the theories of this, but how to bring the theories to life. And that's why I was here for the last 3 days, is working with the Vitasek team and some of the key suppliers on the foundation of a relationship to build and ultimately bring to life the city of acrobats. And so they're using the vested philosophy for how they're going to tackle this big, hairy, audacious, big problem, not a problem, but this amazing opportunity. So that's a little bit about my background and my work. So I want to take about 20 years worth of research, 7 books, and I think I got an hour and a half. So don't worry, hang on, we're going to go for a ride here. So I'll summarize all of that work into one philosophy, and then I'm going to unpack it a little bit more. But I think of it as flipping the conventional way that most organization works, not all, but the vast majority of business relationships think about business from a what's in it for me perspective. I'm the buyer, you're the supplier, right? I'm procurement and you're sales. I'm this business unit and you're this business unit. So no matter where you are in the supply chain or in business, it's typically about how do I make me successful? And this concept, I didn't invent this term, what's in it for me? You've probably heard that. In fact, in negotiation in the book Getting to Yes, they talk about getting to me and what's in it for we, what's in it for me? And so the goal of what's in it for me is that, gosh, here's what I want. Well, what do you want? And so my goal is to try to get in your head, figure out what you want, and then try to win knowing what you want. And so while we negotiate or have discussions, I think we pretend that we collaborate. We say collaboration, but in the end, it's what do I get out of it, right? What am I going to win out of this? And people have that lens when they're actually trying to collaborate. And what we would see, the most successful organizations actually remove that lens and they flip it. They flip it on its head to what we call a what's in it for we relationship. So the best results come when we do what's best for ourselves and you. And so we are growing the pie and sharing the pie. We grow the pie, share the pie. So it's not just about, how do I win today? It's about how do we win, grow the pie, and share the pie. So I'm taking what I do best and what you do best, we're mirroring them up, and then using those resources to produce even more opportunity. So I call this what's in it for we. And it's interesting because when I travel around the world and I talk to companies, everybody talks about collaboration and cooperation, but it's almost like they're holding back a little bit. They really aren't all in. And I say, well, why do we do that? Why do we hold ourselves back? I think sometimes, well, why do we? Why do you think we might say collaboration or say strategic partner, but we just maybe aren't all in? What do you think? And shout it out, we're recording this, so I'll repeat. But what do you think? Well, you're sitting in the front. You must be a good student, right? Good students always sit in the front. So what do you think?
I was a bad student. I think we are measuring the powers between ourselves, who has the upper hand.
Who has the upper hand? Power. So, gosh, that's interesting. And you're absolutely right. Because if I'm bigger and I'm more powerful, why wouldn't I win more? Right? I'm a big company, I deserve it. Look who I am. And so the more powerful we are, we don't realize that maybe using that power wasn't quite as good for us. It's an inherent bias. What other reason? Why do we hold back a little bit? So one is power. What if I'm the little guy in that relationship? Right? You know you're gonna lose because they're so much more powerful. So do you hold back because, you know,
There could be a fear.
yeah. If I'm transparent and I give too much, they're just going to take advantage of me, right? Or we might be hesitant because there's risk. There's risk involved. So there's all kinds of reasons why we say collaboration, but really don't do it. And so what we try to do is teach people how to actually move away from simply saying collaboration to making magic from their collaborations. And the secret here is a couple of things. So I have a picture of Mount Everest. So Mount Everest, what does that represent? A big, hairy, audacious goal. This is something that's hard, but it's an opportunity. It's kind of like Kennedy, John F. Kennedy saying, I want to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. I want to climb Mount Everest. Can you climb Mount Everest yourself? Yeah, you need a Sherpa, don't you? So you have the climber, and I have the Sherpa. And so really the only way you can get there is together. And so just because I have the money and you are the Sherpa, does that mean that Sherpa isn't equal to me? I can't get there without them, right? So just because I'm paying doesn't mean that I'm any better than them. They have the knowledge, I may have the money. But we can use this analogy in many, many things. It's not just buying and supplying or business partners in just about any endeavor we want. If you've got skills and I've got skills, I'm not better than you, you're not better than me. Together, we can be more successful. So item number one, we need to have a Mount Everest. What is it we are trying to achieve? And if I can do that goal on my own, better, faster, cheaper, you should do it. So I say, and actually it's interesting because on the Catapult website it says, do what you do best and outsource the rest. Why would you do something that someone can do better, faster, cheaper, or safer? And so we need to seek out organizations, individuals that can help multiply us. And so having that common goal, what are we trying to achieve? You're the climber, I'm the Sherpa. It gives us a common goal. So one of the secrets to amazing collaborations is to have a common goal. The other secret to the success of collaboration is to pull on the rope in the same direction. Now notice here, I have a pair of hands and a rope, right? Well, what's on the other side of my rope? Nothing here. So do you think it's pretty easy when I have nothing on the other side of my rope, right? I'm going to win that game all day long, right? There's no tension, there's no power. But in a collaboration, in a partnership, we actually have someone on the other side of the rope. We have our business partner. And this represents the mindset. And I think this is the harder part of getting collaborations right, the mindset. And so now it's not me pulling against, it's us pulling together. So let's just walk through this and what this looks like. And before we actually play a little mind game with our rope, I want to talk about the science behind collaboration. Because it's not just the practice. When we go out and we study organizations like Dewesoft, been here for 3 days, right? Amazing sense of collaboration and trust that they have. But the concept isn't just about showing up and acting that way. There is a ton of academic research that shows that when we behave in a true collaborative, what's in it for we way, we will perform better. So one of those researchers is John Nash. Who remembers John Nash? Who knows John Nash? Right? The Beautiful Mind. So, although he was played by Russell Crowe, right? So you might not remember Nash, but you might have seen Russell Crowe. So, what was the premise of The Beautiful Mind?
A beautiful mind.
He had a beautiful mind, right? And look at, there in the movie cover. So if you look at the actual movie cover, he has got a piece of chalk and he's writing numbers on the window. He's got a math equation that he has on the window. And in that math equation, he was a mathematician, very true story. He was at Princeton University, very true story. And he was studying, he wanted to come up with his dissertation because all good PhD students have an idea. So his idea was that if we actually collaborated, we could get more output, we could do more, right? So let's play a little movie. You didn't know you were coming to the movies tonight, did you? So we're gonna watch a movie clip from the movie. And I want you to after it, I'm gonna chat, what did you learn from this little movie clip? Now this is the bar scene. And so John Nash and his friends are at the bar.
Yes, you make up something your papers and try Christmas.
I'm not glad you gentlemen here.
Oh, we're not here for you.
And this moving slow motion.
Does she want a large ring with him? She said swords, gentlemen. Pistols at dawn.
Have you remembered nothing? Recall the lessons of Adam Smith, father of modern economics.
In competition, individual ambition serves the cause of exactly. Every man for himself, gentlemen. And those who strike out are some of their friends.
Strike out.
You can live along the water, but you can't even drink.
I don't think he's
The dark no evil. She looked over. There's a little ash.
Alright, you may have the upper hand now, but what do you say with this? Adam Smith needs revision. What are you talking about? We will go for the blonde. We've lost each other. Not a single one of us is going to get it. So then we go for our friends. But they will all give us the cold shoulder because nobody likes a second chance. But we're fine if no one goes for the blonde. We don't get in each other's way. And we don't insult the other girls. And soon we win. That's the only way we all get laid. Adam Smith said, the best result comes from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself, right? That's what he said. That's right. And repeat. Okay? Because the best result will come from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself. And the group. Ash, this is something like you get to blow on your own. You can go ahead.
Go down, Adam Shell. Go down, Adam Smith.
You're wrong.
Gosh, here is a geeky college student, and actually he's schizophrenic, so he's a little bit weird, right? So most people go, John Nash, you're out there. So he's saying that Adam Smith was wrong. That's an attack to capitalism. That doesn't feel very good. In the 1950s, that does not feel good to most people. And so between the 1950s and 1994, he went on to prove his theory of governing dynamics, and it's named the Nash equilibrium. But he wasn't really attacking capitalism. What he was saying is there's a more enlightened way to be capitalistic. Let's grow the pie and share the pie, right? So if we all work together, we can achieve the best results. And what were some of the other takeaways that you took from that video? What's the point of the blonde?
That she's the main prize.
She's the main prize. But weren't there other prizes that if we looked, we could optimize? We could all go home winners if we turned and looked at the problem another way. So what I would argue, being a supply chain professor, is we have to look beyond the obvious and into the total opportunity. In business economics accounting, it's known as transaction cost economics. So what's the cost of doing business? What are all those hidden costs? Because those hidden costs are actually real costs too. So instead of just thinking about the price, I want to get a lower price, wouldn't the better choice be to take a step back and say, maybe it's not about price, it's about reducing the whole, right? Or achieving our goals. So sustainability goals, our performance goals. Look at what DeweySoft does with performance goals for your customers. What's the value of some of that? Beyond the price, what is the value that we're trying to do? So how do we create value and share the value? So this concept is known as game theory. And I went to school, I graduated from business school in 1994, the same year that Nash wins his Nobel Prize. We did not study game theory. We studied power. We studied power. How do you competitive advantage? Remember Michael Porter's competitive advantage. And what are the 5 forces of competition and of competitive advantage? 2 of the 5 forces are power. We studied things, if we're in procurement, like the Kraujic matrix, 1983. You have a simple 2x2, and your number 1 goal is to use your leverage. See a theme? So many business people have been trained in the art of power. And Nash teaches the art of collaboration. And I study that and I teach the practice. So how do I bring Nash's proven Nobel Prize winning concepts to life in business practice? So this is a classic game theory matrix. Now, after Nash, lots of other people have studied this from a mathematical and economic perspective. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an economist. I'm a study of practice. But if you look at the study of the math part of it, this is called the prisoner's dilemma. You ever heard of the prisoner's dilemma, right? And so basically our choices come down to 2 things. We can choose to collaborate or cooperate, or we can choose to command. Use power or cooperation. So if 2 parties, I have a supplier and a buyer up here, but I could put DeweySoft and your customer. I could put DeweySoft and your supplier. I could put Catapult and the startups. I could put myself and my son, or myself and my husband. So these are simple players. Who is in your ecosystem that you need to work with? And if you both choose to command, I like to think of it as having 2 800-pound gorillas. So the bigger we are, the more we tug. Then on the other side, I can consciously choose to cooperate, so I have a handshake deal. But in the middle is where we fall down, because instead of consciously choosing to cooperate and always constantly choosing to create value and share value, I fall into this ping pong match. I win some, I lose some. I win some, I lose some. Do you see how it goes? I win some, I lose some. Now that's the scariest of all. And I would submit to you, mathematically, it's better to be here than to be here. Why is it better to be in a lose-lose game than a win some, lose some game? What do you think? How about in the back? Would you rather play ping pong or 800-pound gorilla?
No, gorilla.
So the majority would say ping pong. I'd rather play ping pong. But the right answer is you should rather be an 800-pound gorilla. So why? If I can't do this, this is the ideal. Mathematically, statistically, this is where we should be. But if for some reason, my other player, we can't get here, why does this lull us into a bad place? What do you think? You mentioned it. Why a gorilla?
Because of the risk. I know how power I am, and I fight with my other gorillas.
Yeah. So you think, well, I'm Israel and I can fight Palestine. I'm
No, I can fight with the
whoever the businesses. But I want to use my power. That's exactly right. So we want to say, gosh, we want to use our power. But this is a lose-lose. You're both losing, right? But at some point it becomes so painful you exit or you keep escalating. The problem is when we fight and we win some and lose some, we escalate. So then the next time around, I lost that battle, I go back. I got that price concession, I come back. So in business, I think of it as a whack-a-mole. You whack over here and it comes back up here. Having been one of Microsoft's largest suppliers, they whack on price. Trust me, I find a way to get my profit. And I bet most of you have done that. When you lose, you find a way. But we're not transparent. And that creates transaction cost economics. And it also creates what? A lack of trust. A lack of trust. A lack of transparency. So while you thought this was a bad place, it ekes and ekes and ekes and ekes and ekes this lack of trust, and it goes on and on and on, and we actually are preventing ourselves. So mathematically and statistically, it's better to call your losses and get out of the game. Don't stay in the game. Go, you know what? This isn't for me. This isn't a business partner I want to do business with. This isn't a long-term thing. So recognize and exit. Don't do this and then stay. Recognize and exit, but this is very costly. And what you should be doing is consciously coming here. Asking yourself in every action, am I consciously choosing to cooperate? Because as Nash says, the best results come from everyone in the group doing what's best for themselves and the group. That would be a win-win. So Axelrod, another professor, invited people to play the prisoner's dilemma. So he has played this all over the world, millions of times, lots of simulations in the game, and not just him, but more play it. And basically, look, when you look over time in a repetitive game, right, you're my business partner, always return cooperation with cooperation. Be fair with your partner, and don't try to be tricky. Don't try to game the system. So that trust, constantly choosing trust, consciously choosing to be transparent, will help you generate the best results. So I talked about this rope, right? So who wants to play tug of war? Right? How about you? You sat in the front. Well, we'll have you in. Come on up.
Okay.
All right, and Petra, come on. We'll let you play. Yes.
So?
Huh? Yeah, come on. So come on. Okay, so we're gonna play a little tug of war. So who in this game of tug of war? So let's come over here so you can have the orange in the middle.
Okay.
So your goal is to get the orange. You want that orange. Okay. So who do you think's gonna win this orange?
Of course me.
He's a gentleman, so.
Oh, he's a gentleman. Oh. So, not to be offensive, sir, but how much do you weigh?
Well, some 80.
Okay, and yourself? That is a bad question to ask.
How much can I?
How much do you weigh?
90.
Yes.
So, who do you think has who has more power? Now, maybe she has hidden power and she's been working out, right?
Maybe.
But think about this. So you have a power, you may have a power imbalance, and if Petra was had as much power as you do, it's going to be a harder fight. This is probably an easier fight because she's left. So so you're going to fight back and forth. Is there a lot of energy that gets pulled out when we begin to fight? Yeah, I mean, that's just energy. And then someone loses because there's only one orange. Now, what if we created a different way to think about sharing that orange? So, I'm going to pretend you're a chef. You love to cook, and so you like the peel of this orange, and you like the inside of the orange.
Okay.
So now do you have to fight over the orange?
No.
So what happens to our rope?
If we just know that. If you don't know what the other likes, then
Exactly. So
Yes.
what do you do to understand that she wants the outside?
talk or
Exactly. You're a little bit, and actually you can talk and you can try to okay, but what does your better say?
I will
I'm-
split with you.
I really like the inside of the orange because I'm hungry. And you could go, wow, I'm not hungry at all. I want to cook the orange. So now all of a sudden you have a win-win. And look what happened to the rope. There's no power. You're like hanging out. You're friends. Can't shake your hands. You just cooperated.
So
Right?
I get no orange.
No, but stay. No, you did, but you wanted the outside, right? But here's the problem with that. That is a win-win. And if you read the book, Getting to Yes, they use this analogy of this orange. A win-win is when you get the peel and I get the pulp. Well, what if you both wanted the inside of the orange? You're back to fighting. So if you can get to split that orange because you have different interests, that's fantastic. But oftentimes we have overlap, we really wanted the same thing. So we would say there is a third option. And that third option is to plant a tree. Why fight over the orange? Instead, let's do this. So come over here, come on over. And so I want to put the future, let's go hang out by Petra,
okay.
right? And I'm going to put the future of all these oranges over here. So if you're a little patient, we can choose to invest, plant a tree. So what are you good at? What am I good at? And can we invest to grow the pie and share the pie, or plant the seed to grow the seed? And look what that does to our tug of war. It takes the power out, but it also changes and reorients what we're doing. And this is what getting to we, what's in it for we does, is it takes the power out of that, puts both power, your power and your power, and combined, how much do you weigh? Combined, what's your muscle? So combined, you have the best chance of having all of these oranges. So now our challenge is, how do we share the oranges? And that's the philosophy of vested. Instead of us versus them, it's about we, long-term, shared success, shared reward. Thank you.
No fight?
No fight. But as we grow big, what happens to our companies? Functional silo to functional silo. I spend a lot of money. I have a procurement department that's going to use my leverage, right? So as we grow, we tend to grow out of a mindset of collaboration. But it does happen, and when it does, it's magic. And one of my books features these case studies. So I want to unpack, in the last bit that I have with you, the 5 rules to bring this mindset to practice. So we have to have the mindset, but we also have to have the system. Because it's hard, it's often opposite. The way we think is often opposite. So I'm going to go through each one of these 5 rules, and I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to ask you to think about how you in your own business situation apply the 5 rules. So are you cheating on the rule, Or are you living into that role? And we need all 5 rules, right? So rule number 1 is outcome-based versus transaction-based business model. I'll use an example of buyer and supplier. So if I'm the buyer, right, and the supplier, I want the supplier to do something, I ask them to do it, I pay them some money. Per hour, per mile, per shipment, per unit, per widget, I'm paying you to do something. But think about being a supplier now. So I'm the supplier. I've put myself on a treadmill. So imagine myself on this treadmill with this rat, and I get paid every hour I do something. Do I like hours? I love hours. Is it an inherent perverse incentive for me to be inefficient if I'm being paid per hour? The more hours I have, the more money I make. If you gave me something to do, and I'm like, there's a better, faster, cheaper way. Why would I tell you there's a better, faster, cheaper way? Because if I made it a better, faster, cheaper way, it might make me AI today. Why should I adopt AI? I'll work myself out of a job. Instead of what can AI do for me? So I need to get out of this mindset of transactions and into the mindset of results. It's about results. And so I say, get off the transaction treadmill. So my story for this is Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble outsourced their facilities in real estate, dining, cleaning, maintenance. They had 600 suppliers around the world because every country did things slightly different and had their local suppliers. And they said, you know what, we wanted a supplier that could take charge of the buildings, not just take care of them. And they said, what if we thought about the $1 billion that we spend in facilities management a little bit more strategically? So here they are thinking about, how do I lift up my supplier? How does my supplier maybe lift me up? How do we collaborate with somebody to actually create value from something that is such a commodity? Facilities, cleaning, maintenance, there's no brain power to there, it's just how much per hour. And when they entered into their partnership with Jones Lang LaSalle, who does facilities and real estate management, they challenged JLL with an outcome-based philosophy. And they said, you know what, today we have all of these people, all of this stuff. How do we become more efficient? How do we become more safe? How do we become more sustainable? So Jones Lang LaSalle now gets rewarded by being more efficient. So instead of getting rewarded for a transaction, they get rewarded for the efficiencies they bring. Every time they have a more sustainable idea, they get rewarded. So you're linking the suppliers or your business partners' rewards to your mutual success. So having that common Mount Everest goal, what is our common goals? We can now orient the supplier or your business partner to your same goals. So rule number 2 is focus on the what, not the how. So rule number 1 is outcomes. So before I move over, actually, let me just think about this. Let's just take a little poll. How many of y'all apply rule 1, outcome-based thinking, and you're like, I'm awesome. So think of a strategic relationship you have. So if I'm a 5, you're awesome. You always think about outcomes. You never think about transactions. So raise your hand. 5 is always, 1 is never. So on a count of 3, 1, 2, 3, where are you at? Some 4s, some 3s. I got a 2 in the back, a 4, yeah, 3. Yeah, so why do we fall into that transactional treadmill? For those who are less than a 5. What do you think?
It's easier.
It's easier. It's easier. And oh, by the way, that's just the way it's done. I pay you by the hour, by the widget, by the mile. That's the way business is done on a transactional-based basis, especially when you start to think about contracts. Virtually all contracts today are transactional contracts. Attorneys actually call them, I'm going to do that transaction. And so business has taught itself that the best way to do a contract is a transactional contract. That's not true. The very most collaborative, successful contracts are outcome-based contracts, using a relationship to pull something off. So the next time you're thinking about a strategic partnership, can you change the thinking from transactional to outcome-based? So rule number 2, focus on the what, not the how. So I have a video here I'm going to play, and I want you to reflect on this video when you start to tell someone how to do something.
Would you like to go for a ride in the bike? Okay. Whoa, yeah. See, the terms require to keep the bike in this predetermined space. If you want to take the bike out, I'm going to charge you a penalty.
You only ride little space.
You can't ride very far.
Even kids know how to should come with ridiculous conditions.
I mean, look at her. Is she happy about that? So I say you put someone in a box, and then you want them to think outside the box? That's nuts. And so we have to not put people in a box to do a task or a transaction. Do you see how rule 2 follows rule 1? I have a transaction and I put you in the box to do that task. I don't care about your brain, I just care about your hands and your butt to do the task. So if we want innovation and creativity and we want to solve problems, we don't put people in a box. We ask them to think outside the box. We remove the box and say, what's the art of the possible? So, in your strategic relationships, are you falling into the trap, or are you on the receiving end of that trap to be in the box? So on a count of 3, show your hands. 1, 2, 3. 5 meaning you're awesome. 1 meaning not so good. Oh, you got a 4 here. 5. Oh, awesome. 3, 4. We don't have all the hands. Come on. Everyone in here has hands. All right. So why do we fall into the trap of cheating on rule 2? What causes us to naturally want to put people in a box? Our supplier in a box, our kid in a box. We want to tell our kid how to do something.
Risk averse.
Yeah.
Maybe because we are worried that they will not do it the way we could do it.
Yeah, I think, risk rewards, we'll come back to that, but we're worried that they won't do as good. And so, you know what I say? Then do it yourself. So if you want to actually not go very far, do everything yourself. So if you need someone else, you have to learn how to let go, or learn how to teach someone to be as best as you are. And that's a different skill set, being a teacher. Or, maybe this supplier isn't good, but this one is. So take your time to find the right partner. That cultural fit, the getting the right partner is a very important thing. So you're not just out trying to find someone who can do a commodity, you're trying to find somebody who actually can fill a gap. Who's the best Serpa for me? And the more you can find Serpas and surround yourself with them, the more you can do. Do what you do best and outsource the rest. But it counts in our personal life as well. I remember coming out of college and my roommate said we should get a housekeeper, and I said, why? That's the stupidest waste of money I've ever heard of. And he goes, Kate, because look how much money you make per hour and look how much the housekeeper makes. That's a stupid economic decision. And I thought, that's really good math. I like that. So I can now spend my time doing what I can do versus having somebody else, by the way, that is far better than I am. Far better than I am. So any type of relationship, you want to seek someone who can multiply you and take the box away. Now, you had a comment. It's about risk, right? So tell me about that trap that we fall into.
Because you want to have everything under control, and if you open the box, you never know what will happen.
Yeah. So it's interesting being in control or controlling. Microsoft is one of our case studies. We can be in control without being controlling. Think about that. All right, so the story I want to have here is about Rocky Flats. Rocky Flats is where the Department of Energy manufactured plutonium triggers between 1952 and 1989. In 1989, the government decided that they didn't need plutonium triggers anymore. They had enough stockpile of nuclear weapons, and they decided to close Rocky Flats. Now, this is what it looks like. It was 6,400 acres, 800 buildings. It was the site of the worst industrial fire in the United States. It was considered highly toxic and dangerous because back in the 50s, they didn't know how to really maintain and clean up. So it was a very toxic, it's called a Superfund site. And so the Department of Energy had said, well, we need to clean this up. So they put out a bid to find a partner, not really, to find a vendor. So you are the lucky person, you're the vendor that's going to get to clean up Rocky Flats, and we have lots of money, $800 million a year we're gonna spend with you to clean up Rocky Flats. And you know what? We were really disappointed in you because we put you in a box and you took forever, right? And so what do? We're not satisfied, so what do? That person let us down, so then I go find someone else. So you are lucky vendor number 2. I give you the box.
Thank you.
Exactly. That's what you should be saying. You should be saying, I don't want the box. I'm running. I deny to bid on that work if you give me the box. So I give you the box. Are you any better than your colleague over here, this competitor? I've given you the same box, and I ask you to perform to the box.
Yeah, does it matter?
It doesn't matter. So you know what? The losing supplier kept saying, you're doing this wrong. You're thinking about a transaction and putting the suppliers in a box. You're never going to get innovation. And so after the 3rd round, the government finally said, well, that's maybe a good point, because 3 independent auditors came in and said, at the pace you're going and at the pace you're going, it's going to take us 75 years and $37 billion. That's with a B. So Congress said that's unacceptable. I don't think the suppliers are lazy. I think maybe we need to think outside of the box. And that's exactly what they did. And the 3rd supplier came in with an outcome-based model. Thinking outside the box, they got rewarded for their innovation, 200 innovations, many with patents. It cost Rocky Flats $7 billion, not $37 billion. It didn't take 65 years, the auditors thought. It took 10 years. So look what happens when we let people outside the box. So let's look at, by the way, here's a couple of their innovations. This is a glove box. You put your fingers in and you manufacture plutonium triggers. First 2 suppliers, this took a year. The 3rd supplier, who thought outside the box, took 3 days. This is a patent to clean up the air. The nuclear waste was in the air. They did not know how to do it. They knew how to take something and clean it and decontaminate it. But how do you clean the air? They couldn't take this building down. It was a very simple innovation. They had the chemical to clean nuclear waste. So they put the chemical in a can, a spray can, a foam. They colored the foam and they put sugar in it. So now you spray the sugar, the chemical with the sugar. It's heavy, it sinks, it's colored, you see it, you take your mop, you clean it up. Pretty amazing. Union workers came up with these innovations. So let's look up, how are we doing? We already took the count, right? So we already took our count. So let's look at rule number 3, clearly defined and measurable desired outcomes. Clearly defined and measurable desired outcomes. If I'm going to have outcomes, I need to measure what those outcomes are. So I don't measure a task, I measure an outcome, because you've got to be careful. If you don't know where you go, you might not get there. So I want to measure Mount Everest. I want to measure my end game, not the task. So my example here is the I-35 bridge. So it looks like this today. It's a beautiful bridge. The bridge is actually a memorial to 14 people who died on this bridge. right? The bridge fell down one day unexpectedly. So the governor said, golly gee, this isn't acceptable. The bridge fell down. We've killed a lot of people. And so he had this big, hairy, audacious goal, this Mount Everest. He said, I'd like to build a bridge by Christmas of next year. This was August 1st. Build a bridge by Christmas of next year? That's not even barely over a year. It had never been done. He said, you know, I only have $233 million because we weren't expecting to build this bridge. And by the way, we weren't expecting to build this bridge, so I don't have a design. I don't have a supplier. How do we do it? And so you want to put out your big, hairy, audacious goal and put something around it. Even if you fail, it gives people something to move towards. And so that's exactly what they did, right? So they went out, got a bid from a supplier and said, what can we do? Is this even possible? And 4 suppliers said, it's never been done, but it's possible. And we've been trying to tell you for years that the way you're thinking about building bridges can be just as safe and have just as high quality, but be much faster if you think differently. They built that bridge in less than 12 months. They built that bridge under budget, and the budget was already small. They had dozens of quality awards, and they used local union workers. The same people that build all the bridges came together with a new way of thinking. And they were let out of the box, and they were given a Mount Everest, and they rose to the occasion. So how are you doing on rule number 3? Clearly defined and measurable desired outcomes. 1, 2, 3. Toss up your hands. We got a 4, a 4, a 3, a 3, a 3, a 2 in the back, a couple of 2s. So why do we fall short? What trap do we fall into that we don't measure the end game, that we measure our tasks?
It's hard to measure.
It's hard to measure. Yeah. It's much easier to measure something that's known and familiar, the box. We've been in that box for years. It's easy to know how do we measure the box. So it's uncomfortable to get outside the box, and sometimes we don't even, we have to really think creatively to do that. We have to think boundary spanning, because to go to Mount Everest, it's not just about me, it's about me and Sherpa. So now our metrics need to be boundary spanning. Yes?
How do you marry up rule number 3 with rules number 1 and 2?
So they all build on each other. So the question is, how do you marry up rule 1 with 2 and 3? So you have to have your outcome. What's your Mount Everest? You have to have a workload allocation where we're dividing and conquering, and then we measure a boundary spanning. So I'm measuring to go to Mount Everest. I'm not measuring just me or just my Sherpa. So I'm not just measuring the Sherpa's box. The box is bigger, and it said, hey, we're going to measure the end game. But that brings some risk, right? Because what if the Sherpa fails, right? Well, if you don't try, you're never going to get there. And I think all too often, we're afraid to try because it relies on someone else versus we slow down and pick the best partner that can have the most hope of getting us there. So our metrics need to be boundary spanning and end goal focused, not supplier or not task focused. Because that's going to help us pull on the rope together, right? I put Petra and what was your name?
Boris.
I won't get that one. So I put both of y'all on the same side of the rope and the problem on the other side. And so I took that power out of each other and I said, all right, now let's think about it. Now in practice, what we do is we have the partners then define what the measures should be. Not the way they were, but what you should be measuring. And those are usually value-based metrics. Not a price metric, not a how fast did you work, but more value-based metrics. So rule number 4 is an economic model, economics or pricing model, that optimize the business. So we're going to use incentives. So when Jones Lang LaSalle saves P&G money because they're more efficient, they earn an incentive. When Rocky Flats closed Rocky Flats safer, cleaner, and faster than the baseline, they earned incentives. 20% of the incentives went to the union workers. The total incentive pool was $576 million. That's a lot of incentives. But how much did Rocky Flats, did they save the government? $30 billion. Grow the pie, share the pie. I would say they didn't share enough. Should have shared more. But the supplier in Rocky Flats earned 3 times profit margin than they would have in a traditional bid. 3 times in earned incentives. So I have here a picture. Anyone know what this is a picture of? All right, yell it out. Any idea? Any engineers? Any engineers? A pump, you're close. It's not a pump. You're on the right track though. Huh? You're on the right track.
Compressor.
You're on the right track. It is a replica of James Watt's original steam engine, right? And so it's in a museum in London. So why do I put a picture of a steam engine? What does that represent?
The beginning of industrial.
It was a machine that changed the world. It brought the Industrial Revolution. But you know what? James Watt ran out of money. He had an investor, and the investor was all excited about this machine, but it was taking James a little bit longer, and his patent expired. And so James came down to London. Back in the day, there wasn't a steam engine, so he had to take the horse and buggy, and it took him 3 times to get his patent extended. Without a patent extension, without a long-term view, remember when we planted the tree, we had a long-term view? Without a long-term view, we don't have patience to invest. So we need to think about money with a return on investment. We invest, we return. Jones Lang LaSalle finds new ways, they get incentives. Rocky Flats finds new ways, they get incentives. The bridge finds better ways, they get incentives. So the employee ownership model, right? Reward the employees. So growing the pie and sharing the pie is a key to getting this right. So I think about moving from price to a pricing model. A price, you go to Starbucks and pay $4.57 for your grande 2-pump vanilla latte. A pricing model, we win together, we lose together. We win together, we lose together, right? And so my story here is, actually let's go back. My story here is Microsoft. Microsoft and Accenture. Microsoft wanted someone to take over all of their accounting and finance operations. And so how do I actually go from task-based outsourcing to outcome-based outsourcing and reward the supplier? And so using these incentives, they built a model. And they said, every time the supplier helps us climb Mount Everest another step, so we get a step closer to our Mount Everest, there's a payout. There's a payout. So now, instead of being on the transactional treadmill, I'm on a highway to Mount Everest. The faster, safer, cheaper, more effective, more efficient, more sustainable. So my goals are your goals. And my goal as a Sherpa is to help you get your goals. And when you win, I win. When you get success, I get success. So we have to tie those incentives together, right? So how do we do with money? Think about that strategic partnership. How are you doing with money? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. How are you doing? 1, 3, 4. 1. We got a 1. All right, a 4, a 2. So why do we fall in the trap of not wanting to grow the pie and share the pie with our money? What prevents us? What do you think? I know, I see it on your face. You're like, oh, I've got it. Why do we not want to share?
You're asking me.
No, I was asking the person behind you a few rows. Yeah. But I'll ask you. You're in the front. You're a good student.
No,
You sat in the front.
I was always back student.
Yeah. But now you're a great student. You're in the front. You've answered a couple of my questions. But why don't we share? How about in the back? Someone had a 2 in the back. Why don't we share?
They learn us to have a lot of things for us, man. I'm bad in English.
No, your English is great.
Yeah. We have a lot of things just for us, man. Not sharing. By kids, we have toys. That's my toy. Growing up, it's my school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm taught from the time I'm little. I don't want to share.
But in nature is always fighting for some food or
Yeah, we're taught scarcity. I'm not going to share. You may break my toys. And so we think about abundance, about scarcity instead of abundance. But isn't innovation?
Robert Cialdini talks about that.
Yeah. And so we need to take that mindset of scarcity away and say, you know what? You plus me, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. It equals 11. Right? How can we grow the pie and share the pie? So we need to bring that mindset to our money. And when we grow the pie, I have to share. Because what if you helped me grow the pie and I didn't share? Are you going to be a little like that girl in the video? And then you don't want to play anymore. So our behaviors teach us, oh, you cheated. I don't want to share. You'll just take it away. Right? So the last rule is insight versus oversight governance. Now, when I use that word governance, it sounds kind of, heavy. But governance is really the management of your system. So if you have rule 1 through 4, how am I going to keep my system in alignment? And so we have techniques that we would use to manage our system. So, for example, the cadence. Every quarter we have a review. Every week we look at our metrics. So what is it we're doing, our management techniques to watch our system and keep us in alignment? So I think here of going from me to we. Now on our journey to Mount Everest, here's where companies get wrong, is sometimes it snows on Mount Everest. So we create our system to deliver Mount Everest, but then it snowed. Right? So we have to have an external look that we're always looking at what's happening so that we can shift. So if we've already climbed Mount Everest, right? How do I come up with the next Mount Everest goals and the next Mount Everest goals? And this is something that McDonald's does exceptionally well. Exceptionally well. Actually, they're founded in 1955. Look how old they are. 2023, Fast Company's number 2 supplier in the world as being the most innovative. Now you think about McDonald's, do you think of their innovative? That Big Mac hasn't changed for years. How could McDonald's be so innovative? They are the number 1 supply chain in the world. You take any supply chain, you stack it up to theirs, they are freaky amazing. Think about food safety. 63 million people are served every day. The last time they had an E. coli instance was 1987. Do the math on that. That's freaky quality, right? And so when's the last time McDonald's ran out of French fries? Assured supply, right? I've told this story thousands of times. I've only heard of one person telling me when McDonald's ran out of French fries. It was this huge event. There were like 500,000 people there. So they're constantly asking their suppliers, help me do better, faster, cheaper, safer. So they're constantly innovating in what they do. And so old companies still innovating, right? And they innovate not by the Big Mac, but all the things behind the scenes that create value. And they share that value back with their suppliers. So who ran out of chicken during the avian flu crisis? Here's a problem. It snowed on Mount Everest, right? It wasn't McDonald's. It was that chicken company, right? No one could get chicken. McDonald's could get chicken. Why could McDonald's get chicken? Because the suppliers all talk. They're transparent. They're all trying to solve the problem. They're pulling on the rope together to solve the problem. They're looking at analytics and data, and they're really trying to look ahead to see what problems they might have so they can be very nimble and agile, even though they're a huge company. So, how are you doing on Rule 5? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. How do you do? Insight versus oversight. Do you have the fast, agile management mechanisms to solve problems when it snows on your Mount Everest? Right? 5, 3. Yeah? Some 3s, some 2s in the back, 3 in the back. Yeah. So I challenge you, when you go back to the office and you think about that strategic relationship, and you think, maybe I'm cheating a little, how can you go and take the steps needed to take that relationship from not just saying collaboration, but to be truly an amazing, collaborative, innovative relationship? So the first step I want you to think of is trust and transparency. So how does trust and transparency feed on what I'm saying? Why is it essential? What role is trust? Remember our game theory matrix? If I'm not constantly and consciously choosing to trust, I fall into the trap of ping pong. How can I optimize if I don't share? Think about your information. If information is power, information shared is exponential power. Why am I not being transparent? And if I was transparent, what benefit would that have? How could that shorten my communications and cycles and let us be able to solve our problems even faster? So transparency is essential at creating these exponential relationships, but that requires trust. So do you earn trust or choose to trust?
A little bit of both, to be honest.
So most would say earn, then we have the sum. I would actually argue and say you have to choose to trust. Now, if someone loses trust, they have to earn it. But why am I not taking the time to build these relationships and start out and say, you know what, I believe in transparency. Do you believe in transparency? And if somebody does, all of a sudden, it's okay to be transparent. But if we don't say that we want to be transparent, are you just naturally transparent? So the simple fact, and I love this value of transparency in the code of conduct at DeweySoft. I'm going to wear it on my sleeve, and I expect you to wear it on your sleeve. And together, we can get there much faster through that. So choosing to trust. And then if somebody doesn't live into that, then I would say in governance, you would exit them. You've lost my trust. I don't want to work with you anymore. So we want to surround ourselves with people that choose to be transparent, that choose to be committed to our path, that choose to be accountable, good Sherpas. If you're a good Sherpa, I promise I'm a good climber. And together we're going to get there much farther, more faster. So my next question, how can following the 5 rules help your culture? Think about that relationship that you scored a 2, a 3, a 4 on. How would you describe that relationship? What words would you use to describe that relationship that's less than optimal?
Transactional.
Transactional. What else? What other words? Throw them out. Transactional. What else? All right. Let me give you an example. This is from Island Health. This is the Canadian government and their doctors. Wouldn't you think if you were a health authority, you would want a trusting relationship with your doctors? And if you're a doctor, wouldn't you want a trusting relationship with your employees? I mean, with your management. This is where they were in 2016, right? Broken, dysfunctional, distrustful, strained, untrusting, suspicious, bullying, terrible, opaque. In fact, 85% of the words they used to describe the relationship were negative. And they came to a 3-day offsite. Not because they really wanted to, but because they were lawsuits and they hated each other and they were without a contract for 2 years. And they said, we're so tired of fighting. That 800-pound gorilla, it's exhausting and it's costing us a fortune. We don't have a contract, we need something. And the idea was, let's choose the vested way. Because we have to stop what we're doing, it's just not working. So they recognized they were in an 800-pound gorilla, that they were going back and forth, and they said, I have to exit this. But can you walk away? If you're a doctor, can you just leave? You're the only place to work for is the Canadian government. It's a monopoly. The employee is a monopoly, and the union is a monopoly. So you have 2 players, and they said, let's rethink the game that we're playing. So in May of 2016, they came to a 3-day alignment workshop, put the elephant in the room about trust, learned that they knew it was bad, but now they're like, oh. And they chose to trust that day. They walked out after 3 days and said, I choose to trust. Because not trusting has created this ping pong match. You did this, then I'm going to do this. Then you did this, and I do this. Right? You didn't share, so I'm not going to share. So they said, we're going to have a new set of rules. We choose to trust and choose to set a new set of rules. And they adopted the vested 5 rules. Look what happened just 18 months later. 86% positive. And they've maintained that relationship even to this day. We have a 2023 number. So the rules, the behaviors that you choose can create that positive culture. And where do you want to work? That is a far better place to work than over here, right? So it also brings innovation. When the pandemic hit, now for being in the news about this adversarial relationship, they're in the news for their innovation. Pandemic persists. BC rolls out hospitalist at home. They're the first in the country to address what's the new law called MAD, which was medical assistance in dying. They're constantly innovating. Culture and innovation go hand in hand. Choosing to trust and choosing transparency are the core foundations of that. So which rule is the most important?
All of them.
All of them. But none of them. So why would none of the rules be important? They're all important, but if we don't have the right mindset, we'll never get there. You have to start with the right mindset, the vested mindset, what's in it for we mindset, choosing to trust, because we've been taught from the time we were little kids to win at sports. If you lose, you're bad. And we're ingrained in this win, lose, earn trust. And anyone who went to school before about 10 years ago, if you're more than 30 years old, you've been taught power-based approaches. And so it is absolutely amazing to me to run into business leaders right? Like, and companies like Duisoft that have said, I'm not going to fall into that trap. I'm going to choose to have transparency. I'm going to choose a trusting relationship. I'm going to choose to share. Grow the pie, share the pie. And magic can happen when you do that. And I choose, don't just think about that at Duisoft and Catapult, but think about it in all of your relationships. Because every relationship you have, you can choose to be transparent and you can choose to trust. So where are you going to go from here? So I've given Petra a couple of tools that you can take home. She's going to email them afterwards. One is called a transparency commitment matrix, and one is called a trust building worksheet. So you've got these two worksheets. They're simple little tools that we use when we work with with companies, but they can apply to anything. So Petra's going to be sending those out, and I challenge you to do a little homework, because I'm a professor and I can, right? Now, I can't make you do your homework, but I want to challenge and hope I've inspired you today to choose to trust, to choose to be transparent. And if you have some of these relationships, once you get that good foundation, build on that foundation with your rules. So we've got a little bit of time left. I'm happy to entertain questions. Awesome, yes?
So if you're in a relationship where on the other side there is command, do you use energy to try to change it, or you just leave out that relationship?
So that's great, yeah, if you could take that. So the question is, if you're in a relationship and the other party's using power, do you just exit, or do you try to change the energy? So changing the energy is what Island Health did. So sometimes you're stuck, you're in a monopoly, you can't. So you have to change the energy. So I would actually say it depends on the transaction cost. Is it easier to exit the relationship than it is to change the energy? In some cases, you can't change the some cases it's you can't get out of it. But either approach works, and that's why I say if you can exit, you need to exit. It's actually not a bad thing to recognize you're in a lose-lose and exit fast. Fail fast. Fail fast. You're not a good fit for me. This just isn't working out. Hire slow, fire fast. Find your partners that are good, really work to get a good partner. And if it's not working, cut your losses as fast as you can. Great question. Yes.
Thank you. Could you share some examples of value-based metrics?
Yes. So remember, they're boundary spanning. Value-based metrics are boundary spanning. So I can't get there with you, you can't get there without me. Now there's an occasion where they might not be, but most of the good ones, you're going to Mount Everest, the end game, getting to the top takes both of you. So total cost of ownership. So Dell and FedEx, reverse logistics. So FedEx, your computer breaks, they're going to fix them. So they had cost per box, price. And before vested, everything was about, cost per box, get the price down every dollar, every day. After vested, they looked at total cost of ownership. They reduced the total cost across their supply chain for reverse logistics, not what's in FedEx's box. Before, I'm measuring price in the box. Now I'm looking at total cost of ownership. They reduced their total cost of ownership 50% in 2 years. 50% in 2 years. So total cost of ownership, sustainability. How do we work together to bring sustainability? Go to market, speed, right? So there's value in market share from speed to market, because if I can help you get that product out, you're going to get some revenue quicker than you would have, right? Versus if we used a traditional path. And so just think about outcome-based metrics, value-based metrics as the end game and bigger than either party, and it'll get you on the right track. Awesome.
How do you, or is it possible to apply Vested to smaller deals, to smaller projects? Because we learned in these days that this is a system which applies very well to the bigger scale, but a lot of companies here are startups.
Yes, so great question. So in my case studies, I tend to use bigger ones because people know those company names and people are like, oh, what are they doing, right? But it can apply to smaller companies as well. And actually, I think smaller companies, it's easier for them, especially smaller companies with younger folks who haven't been professionally trained in power-based thinking. It tends to be a bit easier. So I'll give you an example of a small company who did, labor services. So they had temp employees. And it was a really small startup company, and they were like, I'm going to have temp employees, and I'm going to go in, and you're going to be my customer. You have warehousing, you have a warehouse, and I'm going to provide the temp support to do the receiving. And so it's a tiny small company. So they go in and they create a value-based way of thinking. They started to look around and say, this isn't very efficient. And they said, well, what if we actually flipped the model where the more efficient we were, we got paid to some of that. And so the supplier got more money and the employees got more money. They had a 300% efficiency. And so I would say that yes, you can apply the rules. They're Dell calls them radical common sense. But if you're a big company and you're used to doing things not that way, it can be very, very hard for companies. But I would actually argue the best thing to do is actually start with that trust and transparency. Anybody can start with the trust and transparency. Anyone could just put in the back of their head, hey, I'm a small startup and I'm gonna need a resource to help me. Focus on the what, not the how. So have those 5 rules put up into your desk. And when you start to micromanage because they didn't do as good enough job, and maybe you've gone through 3 people now, maybe the problem's you, right? And so have those rules and just kind of remind yourself. Now, the bigger your deal or relationship, the more you need to be more formal, right? So if you start to look at contracts, your contract has a lot of zeros, I'd want you to be very formal about that. But nothing is preventing any person in this room to start with trust and transparency. And you will go a far, far just thinking about that. Awesome.
Hi, one more question about supply chain. We're working with a lot of suppliers. I feel like there's not much room for any kind of innovation when it comes to making it better. So I was wondering if you have some tips how to build a better relationship with the supplier and maybe make them more open-minded to some change?
Yeah. So.
Excuse me. Can I just add to that question? What if we are a big underdog dealing with Microsoft or McDonald's, who are our suppliers?
So one of McDonald's best suppliers was actually a little startup in supply chain. You've never heard of them. They're called Armanda. Now they're a little bit bigger. But they went to McDonald's and they said, hey, I've got this idea. And McDonald's just doesn't let anyone into their system. And they said, well, that's really interesting. And they said, let me have some of your data. I'll show you a test. I'll give you some ideas. And they said, well, that's really good. Let's test it. And so you can start to go in and just lead with an idea and say, let me pilot it. You know, one of the best companies, I'm doing a Forbes article on this now, it's called Pepsi Labs, so PepsiCo Labs. So they created a little business unit that's all about driving innovation, and they work with startups. Their goal is to work with startups. And if all you startups in the room, I think they do it all over the world. They don't care where the innovation comes from. And so they're looking for a business problem, and you can apply as a startup, and they want to do a pilot. And if your pilot is a proof of concept, they'll actually roll it out. Pepsi Labs. And so literally they've had over 100 startups that they have adopted and rolled out. One of them was actually sensors in the